Hey everyone, it's Ethan here at eTrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Hollywood Racks Sport Rider SE on our 2022 GMC Sierra 1500. So first thing we need to do is to get the rack itself installed, which is pretty straightforward with this rack. What we do is slide the shank into the receiver. There's a built-in collar around the shank, which will stop us where we need to make sure our pins are aligned. And once this collar is lined up, the pinhole should be lined up as well. So we just slide this through and put our lock on the end of it. And coming around to the front here, you'll see that there's this anti-rattle handle built in. So we need to tighten that as much as we can to take all the shake and play out of our rack. You might want to lift up and down on the actual rack while you're doing it. Looks like this cable for the pin clip kind of gets in the way, which is a little annoying, but now it's in and secure. Now we will fold the bike rack down to get our bike actually installed, starting by removing the clip and then the pin. And you can pull this handle down in the back, pull the top one, click it down, and undo our straps to make sure that they're ready for our bike. After we get those straps loosened, we'll get our center mast up, first starting by removing this pin. There is a threaded area on the actual outside, so you have to line that up to make sure that the pin will come out. Get the mast up and then repeat the process. As you can see, this little notch here fits into the notch on the pinhole. Once our center mast is up, we just want to make sure that these frame hooks are up as high as they'll go to make it so that we have the most room that we can to get the bike in. And now we can actually go ahead and get that loaded up. Now this is an e-bike because this is an e-bike rack, and with the center mast in the way, putting the bike on can be a little bit tricky. You might have to do a little bit of maneuvering. So we kind of just wanted to give you an example. See, we have to go around the mast and then move the bike in. So not horrible, but the center mast definitely can get in the way. Then we want to first start by getting this frame clamp down, and then we can do our straps. We just slide those through. Try to line up this rubberized area on the strap with the tires. Do the front, and then we can do the back. We'll move this other frame hook down just to get it out of the way. Now is a good time to point out that these lock cores on the hooks themselves do have the ability to make it so that you can't press and move the hooks up and down, which locks your bike onto the rack. Now that the bike is on, we can talk just a little bit more about how it's being held on the frame. So as we talked about, there are these padded frame hooks, which do make contact primarily on the frame of your bike, which is fine for some of these heavier e-bikes. But if you have a carbon frame bike, you don't want to make any contact with your frame because it could potentially damage it while you're driving. Additionally, if you have a really aggressive alternative frame or a kid's bike or something like that, you might not want to get the frame hook as well, or you might need to get a bike adapter bar for it. And then, again, it's held in place by these wheel hoops at the bottom and two straps around the tires. A nice feature that this rack does have is the ability to tilt away while the bikes are loaded. So to do that, we'll start by removing this pin and clip again. And now we have to pull this handle out, which allows us to tilt the bike down towards us. It's not the most aggressive tilt in the world, but it is capable of supporting 80-pound bikes, so we probably don't need it to tilt that far. But just to give you an idea of how much room you're going to get, it'll come down about halfway probably before it makes contact with our pedal. If the pedal might be a little bit further, you can come down maybe 3/4, but it will definitely make contact with your bike or the rack itself. That being said, you have a little bit more room to reach in and grab some things that might be towards the end of your bed. Definitely not far enough that you can sit on it or anything like that. To tilt it back up, you pretty much do the same process but in reverse. It's nice because it does hold itself in place before you get that pin and clip back into where they go. So you don't have to hold up a heavier rack and heavier bikes as well. You might have to lift it up and down a little bit again to thread that pin back through, but once you do, replace the clip and there you go. Now we can get our bike removed. Just to get a little bit more into the features of it, we'll start with these straps. Pull those through again. on either tire. Just kind of fold them in to keep the straps out of the way. Then we can start removing the frame hooks, holding onto the bike while you do it because it will start to shift. And then we can lift our bike up, around, and away. While I replace the strap, I just want to point out a few things on the rack itself. So these are hoops rather than cradles that some other racks might offer. Not a huge difference, but these hoops themselves are capable of supporting a tire width of up to 5 inches, as well as a wheelbase of up to 60 inches. As you can see, using these knobs here, they do have the ability to actually slide up and down to support that wheelbase. To get our mast down and out of the way, we'll start again by making sure that we line up that notch with the hole that's available and fold it down and out of the way. If you were to leave it like this without any bikes on, we just want to give you a quick example of how far we'd be able to get the tailgate now. So it does come all the way down. It gets really, really close and might actually make contact with some of your straps. So I wouldn't recommend sitting down on it again just because the weight will probably push you into the rack, but it goes all the way down, and now we have full access to the things that are in the bed of our car. With that out of the way, good time to just grab some measurements to see how far this would live on the back of your vehicle if you were to leave it in this position. So from the bumper to the furthest point of this hoop here, about 30.5 inches, so it does stick out quite a ways. But as you saw in the beginning, we can fold this up and condense it a little bit. Just again repeating that process, removing that pin and clip, pulling the knob out and lifting it up. It'll snap into place and we can grab our new measurement, see how far it sticks out at this point. So from the bumper to the back end, it's about 15.5 inches. So it definitely condenses things down quite a bit. We can replace our pin and our clip, and then I'll grab that ground clearance. Now that we have that in, there's not really any rise in the shank or anything like that, so your receiver height is just about where the bike rack itself is going to sit. And that comes in about 17 inches, so tall vehicle, no rise really needed. It will clear. One thing to point out is that if you do leave this anti-rattle knob in the downward position, that will change your ground clearance. So if you have the ability to, just rotate that a little bit so that it sits flat. Mentioning that anti-rattle knob, we'll just talk about the shank itself. It is a 2-inch shank that fits into our 2x-inch receiver tube, held in place by this pin and a lock core on the end of it that is key-to-like to those frame hook locks that we mentioned before. We don't actually have ours locked here, just for demonstration, but this anti-rattle lever here itself is what's going to be able to keep the bike rack secure to your receiver, just to get most of that shake and play out of the equation. In this position, you can see this reflector on the back end very clearly. It's a nice feature that not all the racks offer, just the ability for someone behind you to see it if you're driving with it at night. But checking out to see what the rack itself covers on the back of your vehicle. If it's folded up, you actually have a pretty decent view of your license plate. It might be a little bit obstructed. Your taillights are pretty much fully visible, and we found with the Sierra, as long as it has clearance over the top, you won't really have that much interference with your backup cameras at all either. Overall, I think the Hollywood Rack Sport Rider SE is a really well-built bike rack. I like that it has the built-in ability to support that wheelbase and the tire width, as well as the weight capacity that it does offer, and the ability to tilt and fold. If accessibility is something that you need to consider with heavier bikes, loading them and unloading them, you might want to look into the Yakima on-ramp. It just has a built-in ramp that stores on the rack that's going to help you get some heavier bikes on and off. But like I said, I think overall the Sport Rider SE is really well built, and I think it's a really solid fit on our 2022 GMC Sierra 1500.